Yo guys, welcome back. Today we got a video blog style. It's going to be, as you probably saw in the title, dealing with tennis players running distance with front foot mechanics and why that's important. So this is kind of a special video for tennis, but we speak about some other sports too. Basically, when I'm fortunate enough to work with many different athletes in many different sports, and when we're working with the soccer players, the football players, the basketball players, the European style handball players, we're dealing with a much larger playing area, surface if you will, where they're moving about. So while they have a lot of sport specific movement, they also have just normal running. And when they're doing their normal running, for example, so like a soccer player going from one end to the next, usually they run around 8 to 10 kilometers a game. We're getting many of them to move to this front running mechanics. So when I mean front running mechanics, that means more landing like a sprinter on the front of their foot versus the heel to toe running pattern that a lot of people have. A lot of the research is starting to show, and a lot of the strength coaches and physios and doctors in this field are starting to believe that maybe these guys are not injuring themselves when they're getting slide tackled in soccer or sprinting to the ball or having a 50-50 ball in soccer, but they're actually breaking themselves down on the 8 to 10 kilometers that they're running heel to toe. So then when they go into their the play that they believed hurt them, and they pull the muscle, they sprain the ankle, they tear their quad band or ACL, we believe that maybe they were already beaten up before. So while we can fix the mechanics for most of the other sports, tennis, that's not really possible, because tennis, along with handball, American handball, and sports like racquetball and squash, are always in a much closer confined area, and their running technique is basically always lateral or very short bursts of sprints. So basically that means they're always going heel to toe, because as we accelerate, we use the front of our foot, and usually as we deaccelerate, we're using our heel. Nonetheless, Toby, I think if you can follow my foot here, I'm left-handed here, so if I'm going into a forehand, usually on hard court especially, I'm going to be coming down on my heel first. That's correct movement. So we don't want tennis players coming down on the front of the foot. That won't work. They can't hit a ball like that. Any tennis coach will tell you that that's not possible. So we need, and same thing with the backhand here, they're going to be coming down in the same position on their heel, and even when they slide on the clay, they're not landing in this position because you would never slide. They're more in a flat foot position. So we've got to find a way in which we can strengthen the tennis player's ankle, knowing that the entire time they're playing tennis, they're going to be going basically heel to toe, which is not a wrong mechanic in this case, it's the correct mechanic, but we know it's very demanding on the ankle, and it's only going to break it down and not really strengthen it back not going to strengthen the ankle. So again, the soccer player, the basketball player, we can make sure he's running front foot mechanics, but the tennis player, we can't really do that. And if you think about all the ankle exercises we do to strengthen the arch of the ankle, or to basically strengthen the arch of the foot, I take my shoe off real quick, you would usually have a towel laying out here, and you would see the people doing towel curls, as we call it, or the towel goes out to the side and they're sitting down, obviously why they do this. They're pulling the towel this way. Maybe your physios or doctors have told you to grip a lacrosse ball, a soft lacrosse ball, grab a golf ball, but it's always dealing with this toe curling mechanism, which is going to then strengthen the arch, strengthen the ankle, so we can move away from the Einlage, which is in German, or the arch support in English. But the question I always have is, when we're dealing with the other athletes, is if you run and you land on the front of that foot, as you accelerate out, you're basically getting that tower curling mechanism, and you're also getting the stabilization that you would from the other exercise that we've shown. So many of the times I tell the other athletes, let's not run 10 kilometers with poor technique and then do 5 to 10 minutes of rehab when we're done. Let's just fix the technique, and then we can do the stretches and the mobility instead of the exercises to improve our bad running technique. But the problem is with tennis, this is where it gets difficult. We've got to keep them in their sport-specific movement that allows them to play their game. So we have a few different videos. I have a few different videos on the heel-to-toe ratio, the absatz in a shoe. But in tennis, again, you're going to need a little bit of one, because they're landing on their heels in a very, sometimes, high impact force way. So tennis is a very specific sport where we need to make sure their ankles are strong and they're able to carry themselves through their match without getting injured, which is why it's so important for these tennis players or tennis players to be running a little bit of distance on their own, or Ausdauer in German. Now, a lot of people might say, yeah, but tennis, you shouldn't be running distance, it's not proper, you know, it's a sprinting sport. Okay, whatever. We're not going to get into that beast right there. Right now, I'm talking about strengthening the ankle. And the best, most functional way to strengthen the ankle for a tennis player is not going to be using the arch support, is not going to be using the brace. It's going to be getting him to naturally run and strengthen his ankle, so then when he's on the tennis court, and we know he's going to be moving heel to toe and slamming down on the heel and sliding in a manner that's going to reinforce the stabilization of his ankle, that he has the strength and the ability to naturally do it, and we're not relying on these, again, braces and arch supports. So again, you might say, okay, that's cool, but Andy Murray has 2 braces on. Yes, he does on his ankle, but watch him move. Look at the lack of mobility he has in his ankle when he's moving. A lot of times our shoe companies say, yeah, but that's the way the sports are now. Basketball, tennis, I think are the 2 major sports that have the biggest possible shoes you can imagine, because we say that's the way we have the sport now, that's the stability that we need. But then you look at soccer, look at Messi, look at Ronaldo, look what the top boot company, cleat companies say in that sport. It needs to be light, it needs to be mobile, ankle mobility is so important for them, that's why the cleats weigh grams or ounces, not these massive tennis shoes. And they are so small that these guys don't have the option to put an arch support or a brace on their ankle with the boot on. So in one aspect we say that that's the way it needs to be, but yet then tennis players and basketball players can basically wrap themselves up in a cast and it's not a problem. I don't think we can have both. Nike can't say one thing, or the top shoe companies can't say one and then go towards the other. So really, if ankle mobility is important for the best athletes in the world, when it comes to soccer, it's also got to be important for us. So the mechanics in the running and tennis are completely sport specific. That is why it is so important for the tennis players to be doing at least a little bit of distance. Not for the cardiovascular health, we can talk about that later, but for the mechanics of the ankle and the strengthening of the arch and the overall ankle complex. So hopefully that made some sense. I think that's a bit longer than normal. Usually this is about an hour lecture I give at a university or another presentation setting, not in a YouTube video, but I hope that made sense. If not, write me back, and until next week, peace.